I try to I try to work at home. I can write and record at home with my families, take care of these kids.
There are voices that make you want to close your eyes, not to rest, but to fully absorb every scratch, every wound, every soul screaming from the depths. Chris Cornell had that kind of voice. It wasn't just sound, it was a struggle with himself, with the darkness, and with a world that never truly understood him. Cornell was never a name embellished by the media. He wasn't a scandal-making star, nor the kind of rocker who flaunted his ego. But with songs like Black Hole Sun, Like a Stone, or Say Hello to Heaven, he spoke for a whole generation, lonely souls in a noisy era, shattered hearts searching for something to hold on to. From frontman of Soundgarden and pioneer of the Seattle grunge wave, to wanderer with Audioslave across landscapes of pain and hope, from a solo artist whose ballads were soaked in introspection, to a man who took his own life in a hotel room at 52, leaving behind questions no one dares to answer, Chris Cornell didn't blaze across the world like a shooting star. He came like rain, heavy, silent, sometimes terrifying, but always real. He embodied the tension between genius and fragility, between the spotlight and the shadows within. And in the end, he left in the same silence that shaped him. So what made Chris Cornell who he was? What made a man who seemed invincible quietly let go of life? This isn't a farewell song. It's the story of a voice no one could ever replace, and a soul that never found its final resting place. Comments that might have sounded like poetic musings typical of a sensitive artist were never taken as a cry for help. In 2009, when Chris Cornell released Scream, a solo pop electronic collaboration with Timbaland, he faced harsh backlash from the rock community. The album was widely panned and seen as his greatest artistic misstep. Critics called it a surrender to the mainstream, a baffling nosedive. Cornell had never faced such bitterness from his own audience, but he didn't retaliate. He quietly defended his right to experiment, to step outside his comfort zone. For someone who had always lived on the edge of the world, being rejected by the very people who once idolized him was a silent but devastating blow. In the years that followed, friends, family, and colleagues noticed troubling changes. He grew thinner, smiled less, slept poorly, and gradually became dependent again, this time on prescription medication. Ativan, a drug used to treat anxiety, became particularly destabilizing for him, leading to paranoia, loss of impulse control, and suicidal tendencies. Warning signs piled up: forgotten lyrics on stage, a distant gaze, erratic late-night phone calls, and a growing emptiness, even while standing before thousands of fans. But Chris Cornell, a master of hiding in plain sight, never let anyone fully see what was truly happening. Within him was a quiet avalanche of tragedies: addiction, depression, betrayal by fans, professional isolation, and the crushing weight of his own legacy. None of these alone destroyed him, but together, piece by piece, they grew into a shadow he carried throughout his life. And when he stepped on stage screaming like he was tearing the sky apart, maybe it wasn't a performance. It was the only cry for help he had left. Though he lived under the spotlight, Cornell remained intensely private. He never flaunted his personal life or used his family for publicity. Instead, he guarded them like a final shield against the world. His first marriage was to Susan Silver, the influential manager of Soundgarden and other key grunge bands. They married in 1990 and had a daughter, Lillian Jean. For years, Susan was both partner and manager, but as lines blurred and tensions built, their marriage collapsed. A bitter legal battle followed, with Cornell accusing her of withholding personal items and royalties, one of the deepest wounds he carried into his post-Soundgarden years. Despite the painful divorce, Chris found love again. During a chance meeting in Paris, he met Vicky Karayanis, a Greek-American journalist. Their relationship grew quietly, without fanfare. They married in 2004 and had 2 children, Tony and Christopher Nicholas. With Vicky, Chris found a level of peace and stability he had never known. Their time in New York and Los Angeles marked his most sober and grounded years. He embraced fatherhood deeply, once saying that at home, he didn't want to be a rock star, just a dad. In one heartfelt moment, he brought his daughter Toni on stage to sing Redemption Song with him, a genuine connection, not a performance. Behind closed doors, Chris was deeply committed to social causes, especially those involving children. In 2012, he and Vicky founded the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation, quietly supporting underprivileged youth, victims of domestic violence, and human trafficking survivors. This work was rarely publicized, but it became an enduring part of his legacy. To fans, he was a voice; to colleagues, an uncompromising artist. But
Critics
to his
hailed
family,
him as one of the greatest rock
man trying
vocalists
to
of
do
all
the right
time.
thing.
Rolling
Even when he
Stone,
didn't
Billboard,
always know
Spin,
what that was.
Loudwire,
His
they all
personal
agreed.
life wasn't perfect, but beyond
But
accolades,
it was sincere.
It was how Cornell
And perhaps,
inspired a
in
new
the end,
generation.
it was
the
the
one
one
thing he held on
Artists
to as
across
he walked
genres,
through all those
Chester
stormy
Bennington,
years.
Dave Grohl,
The final
Brendan
chapter
Urie,
of Chris
Matt
Cornell's
Bellamy,
life reads
Billie
like a
Eilish,
solemn conclusion
have all
in a
cited
novel
him as
filled
a
with
beacon of
beauty and
sincerity
despair.
in music.
Though he
Outside
remained productive,
music,
Cornell
writing,
left a profound
performing,
humanitarian
and supporting
mark.
charity work.
The
Something
Chris and
inside
Vicky
him
Cornell
seemed to
Foundation,
fade.
still active
After
today,
releasing Higher
supports
Truth in
abused children,
2015,
the homeless,
he described
and victims
feeling
of
more
trafficking,
connected to himself
causes
than
he
ever.
quietly championed.
His
in
music
final
became
years.
simpler, more acoustic.
He also funded youth
filled with
rehabilitation
longing and
centers,
reflection.
mental health
He
clinics,
toured under the name
and arts
Songbook,
programs for
performing
underprivileged
stripped-down
students.
sets
where he revisited
His legacy
old songs
continues
and
to
shared
tributes
stories
and concerts.
His voice softer
In
but more distant.
2019,
The Eye
he
and the
recorded
Highway
haunting
tribute show
covers,
united Metallica,
including The Promise
Foo
and
Fighters,
Nothing Compares to
Miley
You,
Cyrus,
which felt
Adam
like
Levine,
whispered farewells.
Brandy Carlisle,
and
outwardly,
more.
not
Chris
to
seemed
honor a
stable,
celebrity, but behind
but
the
a
man
man
was
who
a
dared to
re-emerging
live honestly
independence
in
on
his
Adavan.
pain
and turn it into
He
healing
battled
for others.
insomnia,
Became
in
withdrawn,
2023,
and his performances
after
began
years
to
of
show
legal
signs of
disputes,
decline.
Soundgarden
was
was
inducted
accused,
into the Rock
forgotten
and Roll
lyrics,
Hall of Fame,
a subdued presence on
but for
stage.
fans, Cornell never
Still,
needed a monument.
most attributed it to
because he was
exhaustion.
one.
He
On
was
May
a man
17th,
who stood vulnerably before
2017, singing
Chris
of death
performed
like
with
it was
Soundgarden
something
in
ordinary,
Detroit.
facing his
The
own
show
reflection
ended with
when
slaves
the world
and
turned
bulldozers,
away. Into
his
which he
influence isn't
unexpectedly
measured in
added
streaming
lyrics
numbers.
from Led Zeppelin.
It's in the
My
moments you
Time of
played one
Dying.
of his songs at 2
No
a.m.
one knew it would
in the
be his
lowest
final
hour.
message.
When you're too tired
Later
to
that
speak,
night, he
and
calls
his voice
Vicky,
rises,
slurring his
not
words
to
and
comfort
sounding
you,
off,
but to say,
alarmed, she
I've been
called
there
hotel
too,
security.
and I'm still here.
At 12:15
That's the
a.m.
kind of
on May
music
18th,
that doesn't die.
They found him hanging in
That's
the bathroom.
the legacy Chris Cornell left
unresponsive.
behind.
Not
He was pronounced
immortality,
dead at 52.
but presence in our most human
Though the
moments.
death was ruled a suicide
His story
by
isn't
hanging,
just a biography.
toxicology reports
It's the
revealed
journey
multiple
of a soul that
substances
always
in
has
his system.
something to say.
Ativan,
Even if he didn't
barbiturates,
know who was
caffeine,
listening.
naloxone,
If you
and
believe
others.
artists like Chris, experts
Who
stated
don't
the
just
drug
write
combination
songs,
could
but
cause
live
paranoia,
inside every lyric,
disorientation,
deserve
and
to be
impaired
remembered.
judgment.
Like,
subscribe,
Vicky maintained
and
that
turn
Chris
on the
didn't
notification
intend to
bell
take his
to
own
keep
life.
following these
He
journeys
loved his
that touch
children,
what's most
and
real.
that wasn't who he was
When
when
was
sober.
the last time you listened
The
to
world
Like a
mourned,
Stone?
with tributes
When
pouring
was the
in
first
and
time a
fans
lyric
rallying
saved you
behind
from silence?
#RIP Chris
Tell
Cornell
us in the
and
comments.
#say hello
Because
to
some
heaven.
stories only need
But
a melody to
speculation
come alive
soon
again.
followed.
See you
Some
in the next
believed it was
video,
a tragic
where music
misstep
doesn't
caused
just
by
play,
medication.
it stays, with
Others
everything it
suggest
once
it's
saved.
something darker.
Rumors surfaced online that Cornell had been investigating child abuse and human trafficking networks, possibly involving powerful figures. These theories remain unproven, their origins unclear, but they spoke to the confusion and disbelief surrounding his death. In the end, Chris Cornell's life ended not with a blaze, but with a question, a voice silenced too soon, a soul still echoing through the songs he left behind. Supporters of the theory that Chris Cornell's death wasn't what it seemed pointed to irregularities, delays in the security response, inconsistencies in the timeline, and how quickly his body was processed. What fueled the theory even further was the suicide of Chester Bennington, lead singer of Linkin Park and Cornell's close friend, who hanged himself on July 20, 2017, on what would have been Chris's 53rd birthday, just 2 months later. Some believe Chester was investigating abuse related to his late adoptive father and had plans to go public. While the official story says Chester was devastated by Chris's death, others suspect both men were working on something much bigger and potentially dangerous. Though no concrete evidence links the two deaths to any conspiracy, the eerie timing continues to provoke the question: could two men who had overcome addiction, who seemed stable, fulfilled, and creatively active, really choose to end their lives the same way just weeks apart? Fans began revisiting lyrics, performances, and interviews, searching for clues. Some pointed to "In My Time of Dying" as more than coincidence, perhaps a coded farewell. Others saw it as a spontaneous gesture, now overanalyzed by a public not yet ready to accept loss. But one thing is painfully clear: Chris Cornell's death was not a simple, impulsive act of despair. It was the culmination of decades wrestling with depression, dependency, expectations, disappointment, and a soul constantly torn between love and the abyss. He tried to hold on, to music, to family, to hope, through the strength of his voice. But perhaps at some point, even that wasn't enough. Cornell once sang, "The day I tried to live, I learned that I was alive." Maybe that was his final message, that for some, just surviving is a victory. But for someone like Chris, that victory wasn't always enough to silence the unnamed sorrow. And so a voice that had shaken a generation, a soul no one could ever replace, fell into silence in a world that didn't know how to listen until it was far too late. The legacy Chris Cornell left behind cannot be measured by the 30 million albums sold worldwide, nor the 18 Grammy nominations or chart-topping hits. His true legacy lies in something intangible, a voice that transcended technique, a musical soul bound to pain, existence, and the quiet self-destruction of the lost and lonely. Cornell wasn't just the soul of Soundgarden, he was one of the architects of the grunge movement, standing alongside Kurt Cobain, Eddie Vedder, and Lane Staley. But if Cobain represented rebellion, Vedder instinct, and Staley despair, then Cornell embodied the internal conflict, a torment that didn't explode, but bled slowly through every note. His voice, which spanned nearly 4 octaves, could rise like thunder or fall into a whisper like a confession. It wasn't meant to please, it was meant to speak what no one else could say. Songs like Black Hole Sun, Like a Stone, Fell on Black Days, The Day I Tried to Live, Hunger Strike, Say Hello to Heaven, and The Promise weren't just music, they were sanctuaries. Places where listeners found pieces of themselves, loneliness, hope, and the sheer will to survive. These songs found homes in films, memorials, therapy sessions. Wherever they played, Cornell's voice rang out like an admission that weakness is human, and pain, when given voice, can become beautiful.